Hello guys, welcome to another episode of WoW Source. Now this is the BlizzCon wrap-up episode, and of course there is an expansion to talk about, so we've got a lot of stuff. With me I have Ian Hazzikostas. He is the lead encounter designer. He is going to answer a lot of questions about raiding and that kind of thing, so we're excited to have him. Then we have Chris Robinson. He is the senior art director, or the senior art director. We're not entirely sure yet. We'll find out more about that momentarily. And then we have Tom Chilton. He is the game director, so he has lots and lots of answers for us as well. Welcome, guys.
Thank you very much.
Great to be here.
So how did you guys survive BlizzCon?
Pretty well, I would say.
You survived?
Yeah. I did. I don't know about Ian.
Yeah, I'm still kind of nursing a little bit of that plague flu.
I know, I can hear it a little bit in your voice.
A little bit.
A little bit, okay.
Yeah, but overall, I think it was my favorite BlizzCon. I'm going to come out and say.
Yeah,
because,
dude, I would totally agree.
I came out of it really energized. I think it was the first time, maybe one of the first times that I came out of it not feeling like really, like just tired, like all the interviews, all the everything. I came out of it like, oh my God, there's not another day. What's going on?
Yeah, energized, just ready to get back to it and finish this thing off, right?
Yep.
What was the difference this time? Why do you think you were so much more energized?
I think some of it has to do with how much anticipation there was for the announcement of Warlords of Draenor. I also think that just the sheer scope of it with all the different games that we had going on. We had tournaments, going for Hearthstone and WoW and StarCraft 2, and people were playing Heroes of the Storm out there. Even the store was crazy. Like, I remember back in BlizzCon 2005, we had this little tiny store kind of off in the corner, and it wasn't all that well stocked because we didn't think it was a big deal at the time.
Totally.
But then it just got completely ransacked, and it's grown progressively over time. And now it's like, it goes through the entire convention center pretty much. It's amazing.
So what were you guys thinking during the announcement?
Oh, wow. Well, for one, I actually did not get to be there.
What?
Yeah, I was doing an interview with Conan O'Brien at the time. And so I actually had to leave right about the part where Chris Metzen was coming up on the stage to do the intro for it. And so I was really bummed to not get to see that. I'm actually going to have to watch it online. But I've heard good things.
So you were thinking, I wish I was at the announcement ceremony?
Pretty much.
That was like a pivotal moment for me because we had just been, we're releasing new player character models. So the night before, I'm like not sleeping and totally nervous and just really waiting to hear like that initial player reaction. That was huge, right? So sitting in the audience, everything's going by, it's kind of a blur, and then it gets to the point in this, so we do this announcement kind of trailer. It gets to the part in the trailer where we're going to announce that, and the orc and the dwarf show up on the screen, and like time slows down, and I'm waiting, and I don't hear anything, and then all of a sudden this is like uproarious kind of applause, and people are freaking out, and that for me was just kind of like that final, oh man, that's so cool. I'm so glad that people are stoked about that.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, just a ton of anticipation. I mean, we've been working on this for months and eager to talk about it, finally share with the world, doing interviews in the past, talking about things for 5.4 Siege of Orgrimmar in the back of my head the whole time. I'm thinking like Warlords, Draenor, 6.0, this world we're going to, but we can't talk about any of it. Now, for the first time, it's kind of all laid out there. People can see what we've been thinking about, what we've been working on, and it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think most fans don't really realize how much farther in advance that we've been talking about this stuff for, right? To the fan, I think it often feels like we just came up with this stuff 2 weeks ago because BlizzCon was coming up, and it's like, oh God, what's our next expansion? How are people feeling right now? Oh man, they want this and this. So, really, this has been stuff that we've been talking about for a year now. Actually, maybe even a little bit before. I would say it was a couple months before the launch of Mists of Pandaria is when we first started talking about this expansion and what it was going to be. And so it's been this kind of, you have to really project way in advance in terms of thinking, well, what is the audience going to be wanting, a couple years from now, and how are they going to be feeling, and all that. So, that's part of what makes it tricky.
Yeah, it's pretty cool with the storytelling, though, what we can do when we know that far ahead, kind of where the story's going to go. I mean, we definitely built up and set up Garrosh in the back of our minds, really from day one of Mists, kind of knowing where this was going to end up. And it's cool to see where that happens going forward.
Yeah, definitely.
We're going to talk a lot more about the expansion in just a moment. Don't worry, you guys, that's coming. But I wanted to talk about, you did the live raids. How did that go this year?
Yeah, that was awesome. It's always a blast being up there. It's nerve-wracking up until the moment of. I go through the entire preparation process saying, like, I'm never going to do this again. Shoot me if I ever talk about doing this again. And then I come off stage and I'm like, okay, that was actually kind of cool. We should do that. It's just the logistics of dealing with 50 raiders, a bunch of spectators, a lot of other people involved, playing from across the world. Some people back at home in Europe, some at their homes across the country, some playing from the floor of BlizzCon. And all kinds of things that could have gone up in flames. Some things did. We put out some fires.
What went up in flames? Now, I mean, I have to ask this, right?
Sure, random examples. So turns out that when tons of people, so we have a few routers at BlizzCon, tons of people are connecting to the game from one single IP address at BlizzCon, and Battle.net says, oh, something seems sketchy there. We're going to stop letting you connect at like 7 in the morning on Saturday before the live raid. Make some phone calls, get stuff like that sorted out. Things along those lines.
Okay.
But it all worked out in the end.
Okay, good. Good. So let's talk maybe, unless you guys want to talk about something else that you did at BlizzCon, any of the esports competitions that you saw, anything like that?
Oh, yeah. So
Yeah,
those were
for
really
sure.
cool.
It was, having the Hearthstone Invitational there for the first time this year was awesome. Standing room only, just all the way back for the Hearthstone tournament. It's pretty cool, pretty exciting. And I was really a fan of the format they settled on for that Invitational, where everyone brought 3 separate decks, and it made it really interesting and varied
Mix
throughout.
and match, right?
So yeah, let's talk about the expansions. I feel like there's so much to talk about right now. So we should just start with the setting and why you guys decided to go with that and what that is.
Yeah, definitely. Well, there was a slow evolution, right? We started off with this idea that we've had it for a couple expansions now, that eventually Garrosh would go off and form. At the time, we had different term for it. We had the Mongrel Horde or the Dark Horde.
Yeah, the Mongrel Horde.
Right, yeah, the Mongrel
totally.
Horde. And one of the original ideas is that when he got ousted from power, that he would go and assemble all these different mongrel races from across the world of Azeroth specifically, like the Gnolls, the Kobolds, the Trogs, all these
Centaur,
kind of guys.
whatever, yeah.
Whatever reject races were out there that disenfranchised. So he would go and assemble them and try to take revenge on Azeroth that way. But as we kept talking about it, we really started to realize that it would be a cooler angle if he were kind of more going and reassembling the old school Orcish Horde. And that we really started to gravitate toward that.
Yeah. That was a cool idea. Like, everybody likes those old school kind of mongrel races of WoW, even though they're goofy. And, like kobolds, for instance, like we got a chance to go in and really re-envision those guys and what they would be like if they were super tough. And I think as an art team, we really started to gel on that idea of like, how can we kind of bring those guys back in a way that's really cool, that people feel like they're recognizable, but they're still, really awesome, and it's something you want to actually fight against and be a threat. But as cool as that idea was, once we said, let's go back and really have him sort of bring those original Orcish clans together, no one, I think all across the board, we're all like, let's totally do that. That's way cooler.
In fact, at first we were going to do a thing where he was kind of resurrecting these old guys from the past, and was like, well, are they undead? And it started to get a little bit confusing about, what the setting was and how they were going to be used. And I think that, it may have even been Ian that had the idea of like, let's, what if we actually went back to old Draenor and saw them in their original setting, and that really sparked that whole kind of train of thought that led to where we are.
So you're the guy.
Was it your
Pretty
idea?
much. Obviously it's a collective thing, but at the end of the day, that idea just resonates a lot with people who may have joined the Warcraft franchise just through World of Warcraft. So they didn't get a chance to play through these stories and meet these characters in the old RTS games, going all the way back to Warcraft 2. But there's so much conceptual equity there. It's like the origins of the Orcish race, the origins of the Horde, even if you don't necessarily know off the top of your head who Kilrog is. There's a server named Kilrog. There's a warlock spell named I've Kilrog. Like they're names that you've seen out there, and now you get to meet these guys, you get to fight these guys, and it's pretty cool.
It's funny that I never even thought to think about my server name. Not even once.
Yeah, it's just random consonants and vowels and whatever.
Well, that is kind of how we come up with those names.
Don't forget
With
the
an apostrophe.
apostrophes.
Put them all in a
exactly.
box and shake them up and just tip them out. And
It's like the random character generator, just for zones.
yeah.
Perfect. Exactly. Let's talk a little bit about the zones themselves and the areas people are going to be playing.
Yeah, so those have undergone quite a bit of iteration too, and some of our original philosophy was that, like, okay, we know this is old Draenor, and we know this is kind of eventually what became Outland, and so we knew that we wanted to have a mix of the familiar and the stuff that people have never seen before, right? Because if you imagine that this planet was a planet that blew up, what was that beforehand? And that gave us a really good opportunity to create stuff that, like, we've never seen before,
Yeah, totally.
and also take places that you have seen before and kind of do different things with them and kind of make it nostalgic but exciting.
In other cases, it was more just building upon little hints of things that were in Outland. Like you saw the Arakoa and their little hunched over, race and structures. was like, well, where do these guys come from, right? Like, what was their original homeland?
What happened to them that they ended up all at?
Exactly. This gives us a chance to explore those stories to really flesh that out.
I mean, I think it's kind of interesting to talk about like Zangar. I think originally we all talked about it a little bit, and just in the sense of like the flow that we were going for and the zones that we were talking about making, we just really, we didn't, I don't want to say we didn't have a use for it, but we didn't want it, weren't going to do it, right? Like we just said that's something that we're not going to describe at this point.
Yep.
And I think Jimmy Lowe eventually did this concept of those mushrooms underwater, and it's this amazing, like, you know, there's a whale swimming by and there's the orange glow coming down from underneath of them, which is super epic shot.
Right.
And we all looked at that and said, like, there's no way we can't come through and do this.
I want to talk a little bit about Garrisons. We have some questions on it, so we don't have to necessarily talk too much about it because we have a lot of questions from the forums from you guys. But maybe just talk about like the original idea, how long that idea has been kicking around. It probably isn't a new idea, I'm guessing.
No, I mean, it's been bouncing around in various forms. I think some of the genesis of it maybe is something like the player farm as that worked out in Pandaria. Like it was super successful. We were super happy with how players like just having the little plot of land to care after and grow and come back and check in on. And there's something to be said for kind of dialing that up to 11 and then some. In other ways, it's sort of a Warcraft take on player housing. It's, you know, in standard player housing models, you decorate your living room and you place, you know, a couch and a table. Well, this is Warcraft. You make a base, you don't make a house. And you don't place a table, you place your barracks or your infirmary. And it also really fit into the fantasy and the story we're trying to tell with the world of Draenor, where, you know, you need to build an army, you need to raise an army to take on the Iron Horde.
Yeah, I would say the feature really turned a corner when we started to talk about the followers and how the mission system would work. Because, you know, for a long time when we talked about housing for WoW and, you know, this idea of building things that felt more Warcrafty, the question was always like, well, but what do you do with it, right? Like, you know, it's one thing to have a place that you can customize, but it's got to feel like it's actually integrated into the world somehow. It's got to actually feel like it serves some purpose. Otherwise, I just didn't feel like it would fit WoW. So really, it was that turning point was the followers and really figuring out what they would do and why you would have these NPCs in your base and you know how you would actually make use of them.
Okay, so we're going to talk more about garrisons, I guess, a little bit later. But you actually brought us something very cool. We saw some of the new character models.
Yes.
And we have, you guys, actually a character model that has never been seen before.
What?
I know. You're going to see it for the first time.
How did you get your hands on that?
Someone left their computer open. What can I say? So yeah, will you tell us about what you brought here?
Yeah. So we showed several at BlizzCon, and we have a lot in the works right now, and we kind of took that swath of the most finished stuff to BlizzCon with us to show. But right when we got back, we were looking at our current state of things, and I felt like right now, the undead female, the Forsaken female, was at a state where we could show it at least. So what we're going to be showing you guys now is the basic T-pose, so it hasn't gone through rigging yet. It's not animated. There are no basic poses for it. This is just her sort of standing in her original modeling position. But it's that, and it's a combination of her different hairstyles as well as the old and the new model, so you can see a little comparison of where we were at and where we went to. And
so now, from this sort of position that she's in, now is where you kind of send it to the animators, or how does that really work? Yeah, so we do concept work. We're going to show a little bit of that. I think we showed some at BlizzCon. We can show a little bit more too. But basically, the idea is once we get the model done, the texturing done, and we get to a point where we're just aesthetically all of us agree that kind of hits the mark, which is surprisingly with player characters, or maybe not surprisingly, more so. Like we talk a little bit about zones in Burning Crusade and what those meant to people, but you take something like a player character, and I think
it doesn't get more personal.
Man, it's tenfold, right? And the things that resonate with you, and things you hear from players that they like.
But this is like very much, this is
touchy
the
about it.
lens through which you've seen the game. It's the thing, been at the center of your screen as you've played WoW for in many cases up to 9 years now. And even if it's subconscious, if something's the least bit off,
right?
It's immediately jarring.
Or like a human female eyebrow or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, totally. We had the thing where there was a bug in game a while ago where I think the blink broke. Yeah. And so the eyes closed, or part of the eye closed. It was some kind of rigging problem that happened. It was a bug. And we just got like bombarded with, why did you change the eye on them? And we're all kind of like,
literally what? There's a difference? What are they talking about? Like, Yeah, so we actually had to go look at them side by side and be like, oh yeah, huh, I guess one of them, her eye is a little bit like that.
Yeah, it was very minor, but people really picked up
But
on
you
it.
would notice if you looked in the mirror one day and you're like, why is my eye doing that thing?
You know, you typically say that design by committee is like a bad thing,
Yeah.
and it really is in most cases, but in this case, I think we really utilized people around the team. The art team in general was just, you know, the character art team, everybody sending it back and forth. There were, at any one point, 4 or 5 people that were working on these models, just kind of doing different pieces to them. And through that process, I think we get to a point where we always have to hit that line. We always have to say, this is where we're going. And whether it's a little bit more of a departure on one than it would be the other one, we got to put those stakes in the ground and just go with it. And so I think everyone sort of helped, bring it up to Tom, and he'll be like, that looks really kind of weird, and I don't like this, this, and this. Tweak those things. So what we're showing with the Forsaken Female is basically at that point, we've come through that process. We feel pretty strongly about it. That's not to say it may or may not change after this point, but we'll send it to animation, they pose it out, and we really see it in context then. Like, you can look at the older model or the current model next to the new one and get that feeling of like the movement's the same, see the older animation transferred onto the new model, and that's just the basic stuff. Then our animation team goes through every single animation, and they'll look at the parts that are poppy or weird or maybe just were never polished and actually just bring them up to, on par with what we've done with the Pandaren and everything else. And that process is almost, or is as exciting as seeing the model and texture stuff, because you really get a feeling for dances and, all the things that just come through the nuances and the animation that you
Bring it
never
to
really
life.
thought.
The facial animation, especially. The facial animation is one of those things that until you see it, you don't fully appreciate how,
Right.
like, as the other emote is playing, like the slight arch of the eyebrow or the smile or the eyes opening a little bit, like it completely creates a personality.
I can't wait to see the Machinima movies that get made because
Seriously.
of those new
Yeah, I'm
models.
so
Like, it's gonna
excited
be
for that.
so
That's going
awesome.
to be awesome, man.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. So yeah, that process is team effort, and the facial stuff is actually things that we never really, like I say, we transfer animations, but none of that existed previously. Like, they were really Muppets. They could open and close their mouths and blink their eyes. And then, the human, I think everybody's used to the exclamation, right? Like,
Totally.
oh, I know that animation. So things like that will go in and actually say, like, okay, we know we need to keep the weird arm pump motion, but what can we do to kind of, like, you can now see that he's saying things, whereas before it was just, "Mah, mah, mah, mah," and now he's actually expressing something. So that whole process is just challenging and scary, and ultimately has been really rewarding and fun.
Awesome so far.
Yeah.
You guys want to take some questions from the forums?
Yeah,
Sure.
All right. Volkrin from Malaria, North America. You guys showed off how cloaks now flow better with the new player characters. Might we see a more natural-looking robe model?
Yeah, so more natural-looking robe model, that could take so many forms, it's hard to know exactly what that's referring to, but I do feel like, our
Flappy,
robes,
flowy.
yeah, I feel like our robes are a little tired at this point. Like, we've been doing the same thing for a while. We tried to shake it up a little while ago and do kind of different lengths or different shapes, but I don't feel like we really increased or improved on that system as much as we'd like to. So we actually just recently did a test where we took our basic long cloak and we added we added alpha to it. So what would happen if we were able to actually cut out sections of it and use the texture to define where those boundaries are and reshape the cloak? And we're actually going to show some of that stuff here, which is, the first time Tom's seen it.
Yeah.
So this is definitely,
cool.
this counts as work in progress, is what you're saying.
Yeah, but this is the way to do it, right? Like, we get in a situation where it's a public situation, and I can corner Tom and be
That's
like,
right.
dude, so
Say no to this.
we did this thing, and don't be mad, but here's where we're at.
This is the definition of the grand reveal.
Yeah.
We always say we're supposed to avoid this.
But we have a question about garrisons from Bubbly Kiss, from Khadgar.
All right.
Did I do that right? Okay, sweet. Will purchasing Garrison expansions cost in-game gold, or will they use another resource, something like their own system of wood and rock and mana?
So that'll probably be a combination of both. So we are most likely going to have a garrison resource, like what we call material. Maybe it's stone, wood, a combination of that's specific to the garrisons, along with having gold resources that kind of come from outside the garrison. We think that balance will probably help, make some things limited by some factors and other things limited by other factors. So it should be interesting.
And then I'll follow that up with another garrisons question. 'Cause why not?
Sure.
This is from Dasan from Chogal, North America. Love the garrisons. My question is that, and you, I am sure, have heard this question a lot. Can this be expanded to guild housing?
That was one of our earliest discussions. It was like, is this an individual thing or is it a guild thing? And we actually really very deliberately drove it toward being mostly an individual thing, although we are being very conscious to integrate multiplayer components. The reason we did that was that we felt like if it were a guild thing first, that the guild leader would take ownership of it, or the senior guild members, and they would pretty much hog all the fun. And you'd have the guild master having a great time playing, Master of the Kingdom for the Garrison, and everybody else would just kind of show up on occasion and go, oh, what's our base look like? Oh, that's nice, okay. But the level of personal enjoyment and interaction that you as the individual player would get out of the system would probably be pretty small. So we really decided to start off with it as an individual system that we would build multiplayer components into. Eventually, over time, I could see end up growing into a guild thing. But if that foundation is individual, then I feel like the gameplay will always be there for everyone, and it won't just be the kind of thing that is for the guild master, as much as the guild master might want that.
I know, they didn't write if they were the guild master or not. That was probably an important part. We have Maury from Hyjal, North America. Why did you decide on 20-man for Mythic mode rating? There are far more 10-man heroic groups than 25. Wouldn't it have made more sense to make it 15?
So ultimately, once we're crossing that threshold of asking existing 10-player rating guilds to grow, that's really the main pain point. And then beyond that, it comes down to what we feel is the best raid size for designing and balancing encounters going forward. And 20 has a lot of advantages over 15. 15 is definitely something we discussed and considered, but one of the core points is that with 20 players, we can assume that you have one of every class. We're a game that has 11 classes. Who knows, we may add more in the future someday. No plans to do so for Warlords, but you never know. And with 15, we actually can't assume that you have one of each. So the second we make a mechanic where having a mage to spell steal something is integral, or having a rogue to smoke bomb, or what have you, makes a fundamental difference, now suddenly we honestly probably can't do that mechanic. Otherwise, there are going to be core complaints from the groups, well, we don't have that on our roster. So we feel like focusing on a single raid size for our hardest content opens up a lot of avenues for design. Also, having more moving pieces, particularly looking at the hardest content, lets us do more complex things, like having you break your group up into multiple smaller components and so forth. And 20 just offers more opportunities along those lines than 15.
Let's talk a little bit, we haven't talked about the free boost to 90. Doom Clan from Frostmaid, North America, with the announcement of a single free boost to 90 per account that does not need to be used immediately. When will it expire?
Well, the plan is for it to not expire.
Okay.
Yeah, at least we don't have any concept right now of it expiring. I can't think of a reason off the cuff of why it would expire. So I'll go on the record for now as saying it will not expire.
He can change his mind, though.
And 1 year later, I read in a dev interview.
Yeah.
Don't worry, I'll read you the question.
Now we'll have a flexible expiration for
Christmas Day. We'll make it on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
And we should talk a little bit, what can you boost? Do you have to boost a level 1 character? How does that work exactly?
Yeah, well, you can. You can boost whatever character you'd like. So if you want a completely new character from scratch for whatever reason, you could create a level 1 and boost it all the way up to 90. We're hoping that players will use it on whatever they feel like using it on, whether it's a level 70 character that you've left behind and really enjoyed at some point in time, but just have never really gotten around to. Not that I have any of those.
Tailor dress. We'll go with that. From Dragonblade, North America, you mentioned the New World PvP zone will have similarities to the classic Alterac Valley. Can you elaborate any on those similarities at this time?
Well, we'll have this giant berserker troll right in the middle of it. Ultimately, the question is, what kinds of things are you going to be able to do in this place, right?
Totally.
And here it would be things like, collecting scraps from your opponent's dead bodies so that you can build yourself a, piece of super armor and go attack the enemy with it, or a vehicle, or launch that wave of NPCs at the enemy. Having that kind of constant back and forth with people off on the side, people off on the corners of the map doing their own little thing, kind of accomplishing their objectives, because people may even have long-term objectives. Normally in a battleground, because it starts and it's over in 15 or 20 minutes, you want to, any of your objectives have to be relevant for that 15-minute time period. But in a place like Ashran that's just persistent, you could go and make progress towards some goal that you have, on one day, and come back later on that week and finish the siege vehicle you were building, and then get in it and start crushing enemies.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah.
You are learning
I'm
a lot.
learning. This is what I. What game?
Sign me up.
This is.
That does sound
I'm
fun.
that guy.
Okay, this is our last question. So you guys gotta make this one good. From Lloyd on Argenton EU. Will the NPCs be updated as well? We are getting updated character models. I think this is a very important question, actually. But it would look quite strange if the NPCs would still have the old model.
I agree. It would look strange. So it's hard to say exactly how that system is going to roll out precisely. We've had a lot of conversations about, do we just one day, flip that switch and every character in the world is different and new, or do we give people the option to opt in or opt out?
And why do you think people would opt out of that?
There's a lot of reasons. People
Frame
may
rate.
just be frame rate for sure. That's really important.
From 700 polys to 7,000 polys makes a difference.
Wait, is that problematic? And the other one is just connection. Like we talk about this a lot, and it could be that we just don't hit that chord for somebody that's really connected to their character, and they don't want to see it change. So we may or may not want to give people the ability to just keep those things if they want them. But to use that as an example, say we did just do the opt-in or opt-out thing. If you opt in and you say, yes, I want to see the new player models, all the models in the world will have the new player models. So you should never see an old player model standing next to a new player model, or an old NPC orc standing next to a new player model orc. It should be consistent across the board.
And one of the things on our checklist before we ship the expansion out the door is actually, in many cases, going back and retouching some custom creature abilities. A lot of non-player characters that are orcs or humans or whoever, they have certain cast items or things that we need to make sure look good with the new player models, but we're going to make sure that all gets done.
Yeah, we have
I can't imagine that's going to be any amount of work.
No. Day or two, no problem.
We have a cool anim system where the designers are able to go in and sort of
Hack
pick
stuff.
Yeah, hack stuff. Well, I say cool. It's actually my worst nightmare.
Yeah, it is.
It's basically, so yeah, we have the ability to piece together pieces of individual animations. And when this was shown off to designers, there was a couple of examples, and then an example of never ever do this, or an animator will come to your desk and punch you. Pretty much that third example is what we do exclusively and what we have done.
So we lose a lot of animators from punching people. We're just firing animators
They
constantly.
all have broken knuckles.
You can't work with
It's
broken
a lot
knuckles.
harder.
It's bad news.
Yeah, don't get designers fun toys.
So point being, with the new player models, when we, I talk about we're changing the animations to or I should say polishing them. We're not really changing anything. But we may have something where originally there's a work animation and his arm's traveling in a certain way, and then we change that and there's much more of a range of motion. That can lead to all kinds of interesting things when suddenly you plug it into a new model and they're in the corner doing something that you don't want them
I
doing.
hacked a couple animations together to make a baseball swing because we needed it for this quest. This quest couldn't exist without the baseball swing. So.
And before he's swinging like a baseball, and now he's smacking himself.
All right, guys, that was the last question.
Awesome.
Congratulations on an awesome BlizzCon. I hope you
you so
guys had fun. I hope you feel better.
No, yeah, it was a blast.
Yeah, super cool.
And thank you guys so much for watching.